As a kid, I had a pretty unique set of imaginary friends. They resurfaced in my teens, and that's when I realized how messed up they were. They still sometimes talk to me, but mostly stay at a distance nowadays. I have lots of stories about them. I can go into detail if people want. Well, I guess it all started when I was 8 years old. There was a huge-ass forest behind our house, and after school, I would just run around, doing whatever little kids did, exploring and whatnot. There was a playground pretty deep into the forest, which few people knew about. I would go there and swing a lot. One day, I found myself drawing with chalk on one of the concrete walls which surrounded the park. As I stepped back to admire my work, I noticed that my shadow was kinda twitching. I stood there, staring at my shadow for a while. I remember being pretty confused. Then it said something. My shadow's head would twitch more violently than the rest of its body while communicating with me. It spoke with a beautiful voice, but definitely masculine. It said that it was from a faraway land and had been waiting for someone to find him for a long time. I talked back to it, but the shadow did not respond, and the shaking gradually stopped completely. Well, the next day, I decided to go back down to the park and try to talk to the shadow again. I approached the same concrete wall and stared at my shadow. Soon, the twitching started, and once again, the shadow talked. It seemed happy that I had returned, and apologized for leaving yesterday. I got the impression that the shadow was an adult, even if it was the same size and proportions as me. The shadow and I talked for a long time, and he informed me that he is an ambassador from somewhere that is not here. Those were his exact words. I asked him something to the effect of, "Why are you in this park?" To which he replied, "Because only you know of this place." I remember feeling a chill when he said this, remembering that I was all alone in an abandoned park in the middle of the forest. Feeling more than a little creeped out, I quickly said goodbye and started walking away. As I got further away from the wall, my shadow obviously began lying face down on the forest floor. It seemed to cause him a lot of pain, but being a scared 8-year-old child, I continued on walking. I remember the twitching stopped on all of the shadow that was on the floor and not the concrete wall. The shadow did not want me to go, and the last thing he said as his head reached the forest floor was, "Hold on to yourself." I had no idea what he meant, and the rest of the day went on pretty normally, until I fell asleep that night. After meeting the shadow in the park, my dreams began taking a surreal and twisted turn. This dream was extremely vivid, and all of the pain I described was actually felt. In the dream, me and the shadow, who was now fully three-dimensional, he was just a dark shadowy humanoid. We were walking up towards a massive tower, which had multiple seemingly random spikes jutting out of it. Think Empire State Building, but made out of a smooth, dark, purple stone. The tower was placed on a cliff overlooking a completely still ocean. It was nighttime. Me and the shadow were talking about something, I don't remember what, until we got to the tower's opening. There wasn't a door or a gate or anything, just an opening in the dark purple stone. The shadow said something to the effect of, "I cannot accompany you inside the tower," so I continued inside alone. The last thing the shadow says to me is, "Hold on to yourself." Continuing to walk, the tower somehow shifts into a cabin in the middle of a red desert. The cabin looked run down and was made of twisted and warped grey wooden planks. I began feeling this aura of complete hopelessness and despair. A hooded figure floated out of one of the windows of the cabin and continued to float until it was eye level with me. Now, this thing was humanoid to some degree, save for the fact that its skin was dark purple and it had 3 eyes. Its face was elongated and its mouth had very small, but seemingly infinite amounts of small fangs. I have drawn this figure multiple times if you would like to see a better description. Even as an 8-year-old child, I knew this was bad news, so I ran into the cabin and jumped into a rusty metal bed, pulling some covers over me as I did. The covers were thin, and I could see through them. The bed was placed next to a window, and I watched as the figure slowly floated up to the window and snatched the covers off of me. It began smiling, a very wide, toothy grin. The thing began to rip and tear into my stomach and chest area, consuming anything that it ripped out. It then threw its face into the wound and began chewing. I cannot even begin to describe the amount of pain I felt in that moment. More than my body felt that pain, my soul felt like it was burning. I woke up right after that, still in pain. I could feel the pain from the dream. And that was the first nightmare, and my first encounter with what I will refer to as the Soul Eater. The pain lingered for the rest of the day, and I decided that I should talk to the shadow since he was in the dream. So I made my way into the forest and into the park and approached the concrete wall. Once again, my shadow began twitching and shaking. The shadow began to make a sort of crying noise, and I asked him what was wrong. The shadow said that he failed to protect me, and as a result, part of me was stolen. This is what the shadow claimed, at least. I asked him what that thing was, and he replied simply, evil. Now, naturally, as a rather adventurous little kid, I asked the shadow if there was any way to stop this thing. The shadow stopped twitching for a second, but quickly started again. The shadow scoffed at my question and replied, "It has tasted you. You will never be safe." The shadow stopped twitching. I felt the aura of hopelessness again. I actually began to break out into a cold sweat. I was 10 minutes away from home, deep in the forest with a setting sun. I looked around the trees and spotted something. A man was walking towards the park. I climbed over the concrete wall and situated myself so that only my eyes were above the wall. The man swung his arms too high and kicked his legs out too far when he walked. As he got closer, his skin also stuck out. It was very pale, like the color of paper, I remember thinking. The man walked to the center of the park and sat down at a bench, staring into the woods, completely still. The feeling of dread was overwhelming. I was terrified. I figured that I would be able to walk straight out of the park area from behind the concrete wall, so that's exactly what I did. I made it back home without trouble, but the aura never dissipated. The pain in my stomach area had gone away at this point though. That night, as I fell asleep, I had another dream. I was in the park, swinging. The shadow was in the swing next to me. It was completely silent. At the peak of the swing's height, I could make out a figure walking through the woods towards the park. It was the same one from earlier, dressed and walking the exact same way. I looked at the shadow, and he turned his head towards me. Hold on to yourself. The shadow began twitching and slowly faded out of existence. I looked back towards where the figure was. It was gone. The swing stopped. I was sitting completely still in the swing, facing this man. He was dressed in a white button-up shirt with brown pants, brown shoes as well. The man's face was normal, save for being the color of paper and the lack of a mouth. The area where the mouth should have been was completely smooth. The man was staring at me, unmoving. Slowly, a mouth began to form out of nothing, and it continued growing until it went from one side of his skull to the other. He walked towards me. I could not move. His entire face had disappeared at this point. It was just smooth pale skin stretched over his skull. He reached his left hand out and touched my face. His hand did not feel strange or anything, just a normal hand, but now, his face began filling in with a mouth, a nose, 2 eyes and ears. They were mine. He smiled as I reached up to feel my own mouth. My mouth was gone, replaced by smooth skin stretched over my skull. I woke up. This was my first encounter with an entity I call Blindface. Being a kid, it never occurred to me what was going on was absolutely insane, so I again decided to go and try and talk to the shadow. When I got to the concrete wall, and my shadow began twitching, something different happened. The shadow sort of climbed out of the concrete wall. The shadow appeared as a blurry, shadowy humanoid, distinctly male, though he had no features on his body. I was in awe. The shadow just looked at me, and then down at its hands, seemingly just as in awe as I was. At least, that's the impression I got. The shadow walked up to me and put his hand on my face. It was cold. He seemed relieved that I still had my face. "You need to be more careful," he said. Slowly, 2 green points began to form where the shadow's eyes would be. I asked him what he meant, as I had done nothing dangerous. The shadow began walking around the park, often stopping to examine the leaves on trees. I asked him what he meant again, and this time, the shadow stopped and looked at me. If you want to continue being, you must learn from me. He said this very sternly. I agreed, and he said that I would need to come and see him once a day to study, or something to that effect. I agreed, and after some contemplation, I asked if he wanted to play tag. The shadow looked at me, his head tilted as if confused, and immediately pressed against the ground, disappearing for the day. I'm going to go to bed now. I can continue tomorrow possibly. Some weird stuff is going on now, so I'm not sure. And the OP never returned, so who knows what happened. When this happened to me, I was growing up in the middle of nowhere in the sticks of Michigan. There was obviously not much to do but be outside. My family and friends loved to hunt, and we owned a lot of land. At least twice a year, we'd go to our cottage up north a bit. Only neighbors were retired people, and maybe some yuppers that also own cottages. Be really late at night. I am with my best friends, just walking around. We got done playing at the little park they had. We decided to take the long way back and go past this fence that we had. I see an old building and so many old cars and such. I decide, lol, okay, let's go explore. We don't have flashlights. There is no cell phones or anything but our CD players. We get inside. I can't really see anything, but we spot a fridge, open it up, and there is jarred fruits and stuff. We grab them and start throwing them at cars. That was a bad idea because it smelled so bad and it was all over our hands. We decide to go inside more and see if we can get to the highest level. After some crashing around, we finally get to the top. I start hearing some really weird sounds and stuff moving around us. We're a little bit scared considering we have nothing with us and we're kind of blind in the darkness. Suddenly, a bear starts making its way towards the broken glasses and the fruit that we threw earlier, which also happened to be by the entrance. Eventually it leaves. We figure we better head back. We get lost, trying to navigate through the house and stuff. Ended up in maybe a really big room or something. No freaking idea, because inside it's pitch black. You know when it's really dark and you lose your sense of sight, but your hearing ability increases. Anyway, we were using our hands to guide ourselves against the walls when my buddy kinda shudders. I ask him what's up. He's like, bro, feel this. I make my way closer to him, stumbling about, and trip over a bucket filled with something god-awful. I get up, he grabs my hand, and puts it on what he wants me to feel. It literally felt like flesh or something. I freak out and a million things run through my head. I am mostly wondering why the hell he made me touch it. I am also wishing we never came here. We keep moving. Then we start hearing something creeping around, so we stop. I sort of see an entrance or something of the sort because light is shining through it. We stop hearing noises, so we carefully walk over to the light. Both of us stop dead in our tracks after the sound we hear. It was a bobcat making that awful call it does that sends goosebumps and cold sweats through your whole body. Of course we cannot see this thing, but it has to be close. It must be what we heard walking around maybe, who knows. After maybe 20 minutes, we start walking out and try our best to get back around to the path back to the cottage. We look around and try to remember where this place was so we can check it out in daylight and bring flashlights. As we look around, we see a shape in the dark moving by the cars, insta-scary mode. We both look at each other and book it back down the path. I don't know how long exactly it took, but we finally got back to the cottage just when my parents were pulling in. They asked why we were out so late, that it was very dangerous to go out during the night because of bears. We're like, yeah, sorry, but we don't tell them anything else. We stay up pretty late talking about it, but we know that we definitely want to go back. Eventually, daylight comes. Tell parents yada yada, we're going to the park, see ya. We are armed with flashlights and knives, and we try our best to get back to that place. Eventually, after maybe 45 minutes, we find it. We look for tracks to see the bear tracks, and then where the path was, there was the bobcat tracks. We both think about how lucky we were to be alive. Completely forgot about the figure moving by the vehicles the night before. Enter the building with our flashlights, and we start looking around a bit. We eventually find that room. Turns out it was sorta in the basement, not sure how we ended up down there. I look down on the ground and see there was like a red paint or blood, who knows, all over the ground where I tripped over. I see my shoe marks, but I also see someone else's prints. My friend said they were not his, and it would make sense, considering that these were going further into the room. It dawns on us about the thing we felt that was a fleshy feeling. We start searching around for anything that could feel like that. We don't see anything, so we're really scared at this point. We decide to follow those other prints, and they sort of lead to another staircase going deeper down, but it stopped leaving a mark. We decide, well, let's go. We go down there, and it looks like someone was sort of living there. There was some food out, like some cans, etc., and a makeshift bed, and a pretty cool looking chair that looks like it was made of bone and sticks. We decide that maybe we should go, but as we are leaving, we hear some crackling outside. We get really big-eyed and stare at each other, then book it upstairs to the roof again. Once up there, my friend grabs me and throws me down. I knew exactly why, but he covered my mouth anyway. We hear footsteps footing down the steps into the basement below. Instead of going back down, we figure it's better to jump off. It wasn't too high, so did that parkour looking shit, Legend of Zelda style. Once we land, we hightail it to the park. We start playing around on the swing set, thinking about how scary that was and wondering what kind of person would want to live there exposed. Then we start wondering about what we felt that was fleshy that night. We still have no idea. This one happened when me and my friend were around 15 years old. We found this abandoned house on the outskirts of town. We think, why not go check it out? Small town, big trouble. We have never ever seen someone at this place for as long as I can remember, but the house looks quite modern. Everything is locked, but the windows had these weird locks that you could basically have one person lifting the window and someone else pounding the top part to disengage the lock to open it. I crawl in and fall straight to the ground. I go and unlock the door for the friend. Then we lock the place back up. Quite a few items were still in the house, like all the furniture, lights, and other stuff like light bulbs, cleaning stuff, etc. Walking around, nothing too interesting or spooky. We get to the second floor. That is where stuff got creepy. Once we got up the stairs, the first thing that we saw was a fresh pentagram in the room directly in front of us. It looked really legit too. It had tons of stuff in there, I don't even know what it was. We look around more and just see all kinds of weird stuff. We decide if we're going to explore more, we should move a couch on the stairs. Took both of us to move it down the steps and block off the entrance to the stairs. We start looking around more and find like a bunch of pictures of people that we kinda knew in school. They were graduates of some years past by, typically pretty girls and jocks. I think, this is kinda weird, considering like 4 of them are dead. Various reasons though. One committed suicide, one died in Iraq. Other 2 were together and got hit by a drunk driver. We are so freaked out, but we keep finding more and more weird stuff. Start thinking maybe it's time to leave when we start hearing footsteps and stuff downstairs. We pretty much figure that we're dead and probably getting sacrificed to Satan. We hide in a room, but there is a pentagram drawn on the wall with dried and crusty blood, and then some illegible shit that was maybe, I don't know, Latin. We are thinking of an escape plan. We might jump out the window, but that would probably break my legs. We find a nasty, rusty, crusty, bloody machete and a baseball bat, and we're like, damn, we might have a chance. We are walking down the steps and see that there is a sheriff's car. We're like, oh my god, we're saved. But then I think we're both thinking about what the officer might say and do when he looks at this place, especially if he sees us holding weapons. We head down the steps and put down the weapons. We notice that the couch is moved and in the center of the room. We're like, what the hell? I mean, we may be young, but we are pretty strong, and it took 2 of us to wedge it in there, so what's going on? We look out the window, and the sheriff car is gone. Not really sure what to think at this point. We just unlock the door and walk outside and go back into town like it never happened. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. You know what? I'm gonna contribute a not so great story myself. I moved into a new place with a couple of roommates back in 2010. The front yard was much bigger than the back and full of trees. 1/3 of the front yard is taken up almost entirely by this gigantic cottonwood. Specifically, a standing dead cottonwood with a huge hollow in the trunk on the side closest to the house. The tree has been bark beetle food for years. The tree is easily 4 times taller than the house and is thick enough around the trunk it would take 3 to 4 people holding hands to hug it. The house itself is 2 stories tall, complete with an attic and a duplex. My room is on the 2nd story and closest to the tree. Fast forward to January 2018. The tree is still there, no problems. We occasionally talk about cutting it down. My roommate/landlord is an AZ visiting family, and it's raining constantly for days. I wake up for no discernible reason shortly before dawn. I can see that the sky is getting lighter through my drapes, but it's still pretty dark. It's January, and while we don't really get a real winter here, I'm the special kind of dumbass that keeps my window open all year round. So it does not take all that long for me to realize what woke me up. A loud, woodsy, drawn-out creak, not quite in time with the steadily pouring rain or the wind. It gets loud enough, I actually crawl out of my blanket cocoon and look. I can't see anything. I sit back down and get comfy. There is a creak and then a crash. I look outside again and see a huge branch on the ground and the scar where it tore free from the tree. Holy shit, that could have been our house. I hear the next door neighbors freaking out over what the hell that was. I go downstairs and take a proper look. There is a tree branch, thicker around than I can get my arms around, laying on our front yard. It crushed the office chair we've been using as a lawn chair, and not much else. And, well, some of the neighbors' roof shingles. The only casualties of what could have been a disaster is an office chair and some shingles. If it had not been for another tree between our house and the neighbor's house would have been smashed. Hell, even our swamp cooler, which usually gets stored underneath the tree when we're not using it, was spared. I take it as a sign from God that I should get my life together. That goes about as well as you would expect from a chronic 4chan user. My landlord/roommate comes back from vacation, chops up the branch in our yard, and hires a tree service. Local law says a homeowner cannot attempt to DIY it to give the tree a haircut. The tree is still standing, but now it's shorter than the house. Taking the rest of it could easily run up a couple of grand. I still think about that metaphysical smack to the back of the head and feel incredibly guilty for carrying on as I have. Oh well. I have posted this one a couple of times before, but it might take 2 posts this time. I was camping with my friends in the woods when this happened. It was 3 guys and 2 girls, including me. We are planning on camping next to a big lake that's about 7 miles away from the parking lot. We stop just for lunch and snacks. We are alone the whole time, which is normal because it's mid-November and it's a pretty isolated area. We get to the lake at around 7ish. It's pretty dark, but we managed to get the tents done fairly quickly. I am munching on some candies when one of the girls points to the other side of the lake. Is that a person? I can't see it at first, but yeah. There's someone in a red trench coat walking towards us. They have no flashlight on, and they don't have a backpack. Mind you, it's about 9 p.m. now, mid-November. It's cold and dark. We figure out it's a person just because of the moon. It gets closer. It's actually a girl in her mid-20s, pretty attractive. Acts normal. Tell her to spend some time with us. Again, normal girl is acting normal. The only unusual thing about her is how she arrived to the camp. I could have sworn she was hitting on me. Anyways, we talk for a while. Smoke and have a few beers, but at 1 a.m., she just suddenly says that she's leaving. What the hell are you talking about? You can't leave in the middle of the dark, in the middle of nowhere. She is convinced that she is leaving. We lend her one of our flashlights and a Snickers bar. That's important later. She leaves but does not use the flashlight. We cannot see any lights coming from where she walked towards. We all feel guilty. We really should not have let her go. But it's not like we could have just pinned her down and made her stay. The girl even kept saying there was nothing that we could do to make her stay. We attempt to call the police, but there was no signal. We decide to go to sleep and hope for the best for her. It's the next day. We clean up all our stuff. We make breakfast and start heading back. There is nothing weird on the way back. We are discussing about the girl from time to time, but that's it. We are all worried and feeling really guilty. About 1 hour before arriving to the parking lot, we say, "Hey, is that her?" There is a red trench coat between the trees. Thank goodness she didn't get lost. As we approach her, we realize it's not her. It's just her coat hanging from a tree branch. My fear goes to 1,000. What if she was kidnapped? What if she's dead? Start looking around the tree where the coat is hanging from to see if we can find anything else. We find what we assume is her t-shirt neatly folded on a rock. What we assume are bird bones in a half-eaten Snickers bar. No trace of her though. We start theorizing, but we all agree that we should get back and call the police. We go back to the car. We are alone for the whole time. No more people or cars. We contact the police, tell them everything, and spend this afternoon at a local bar talking about possible theories and outcomes and waiting just in case the police need us. They tell us that they will let us know if they need anything and go back home. To this day, we have no idea what happened. As I said, we have a lot of theories, but none checks all the clues and weird stuff. Not really scary, but the whole ordeal has a very eerie feel to us. In the time-trodden foothills of the Appalachians, there is a town that used to be. You won't find much in the way of history in the dead town of Sayre, Alabama, mainly because it's man's nature to forget the places he would rather not remember. But at its meager zenith, it was a mining camp in the truest sense of the term. From the hillside overlooking the Sayre mines, for our Yankee friends, that's Sayre, equal emphasis. Rows of humble houses, little more than shacks when built, lined roads paved in the broken rock of their inhabitants' labor. Grey the houses were, battleship grey, bleached towards white by decades of blistering sun. Even the occasional house of a differing shade, painted by someone fool enough to think they could bring some cheer to such a place, succumbed to the oppression of that grey community, its vibrancy crushed by forces not unlike those which form the coal, heat, time, and the pressures of deep poverty. To the locals, it was simply the camp. My people were there before the camp, living in the hills for generations before civilization caught up with us, half-breed muskogee that we were. We had fought the relocation and kept title on our land. We lived across the Locust Fork, the river that divided the loose community, like a line drunkenly scrawled in the earth in ink of muddy green. They were too proud to work in the earth, choosing to keep to the old ways. They trapped, hunted, and bartered with the camp folk. Some of them even served as a sort of off-the-books police force for the company. But hard times can force even the proud to humble themselves. When those hard times came, they crossed the fork and went to work for the company. My great-great-grandfather among the first. That was in the early days of American industry, before the conveyors and the steel behemoths that came to gnaw the roots of the mountains, long before the laws preventing children from risking their short lives for company scrip. He and his two brothers wriggled down into holes far too crude to dignify as mine shafts, digging at the coal seam with short-handle picks, crawling on their bellies, hauling sacks filled with the dark, noxious rock. My ancestor, the youngest of the three, was still small enough that he could turn around in that cramped space, so he was elected to haul the sacks. One day, as he was hauling out a load, he heard his brother shouting, a brief commotion, then the terrifying growl of the shaft letting go. As the tale came down to me, he described it in these words. It sounded like the biggest, meanest dog you ever heard, only bigger and meaner, and it done eat you. His oldest brother shouted for him to get out as fast as he could, and he did, hearing the tunnel collapse behind him as he went. He came out screaming for help, but the company man overseeing the dig took one look and said, "They're gone, boy. and then tasked one of the other miners with seeing him home and went straight back to work. When he got home, the family left him there with his mother and struck out for the dig. They still held to the Muskogee Creek burial ways, so it wasn't about recovering the bodies, it was about respect. The fact that they just treated it like business as usual and weren't even willing to stop working long enough to respect the prayers being offered. Well, the rest of the family took that bad enough, but his mother went crazy with grief. She was something of an awala, a medicine woman, and she cursed the company and the camp, saying that the water of the ground would become poison to them, that the ground itself would burn beneath their feet, and the spirits of her dead sons would trouble those who refused to honor them. As the weeks passed by, the hole where my great-uncles died began to flow with water. Many believed that they had struck a spring and had knocked loose the shaft supports, retreating from the water. Others remembered my grandmother's words. In short order, that spring formed a tributary creek. In months, it had begun forming a pond, turning the surrounding terrain to marsh, effectively ending the mining operations on that particular hill. The locals said it was the curse. A few years later, one of the foreman's sons drowned in the fork. His body was never recovered. One of the boys that was with him went to his grave, swearing that something had pulled that boy underneath the lake. Then the well water went bad. The company was forced to spend a small fortune on a deal with the Birmingham Waterworks, running miles of pipe and new pumping stations to stop the hemorrhage in their workforce as they saw other employment, other homes, and water that did not stink like death. They never really recovered. Decades later, they were still leasing those dilapidated shacks to anyone they could as the abandoned mining operation descended into ruin. By the time of my youth, the old sediment ponds had evaporated, and by some means no one ever quite explained, all those tons of sediment and coal dust began to smolder. My friends used to call them the cracks of doom, because at night you could see the red of the fires below shining up through the cracks in the mud. It still serves as my reminder that there are places in the world where hell lies a little bit closer to the surface. As for the spirits of my uncles, they are still around. As a child, my mother was spending a weekend with her grandparents. From her sleep on a hide-a-bed in the living room, a sound from the kitchen awakened her. Fearing a mouse, she retrieved a flashlight from my grandparents' nightstand and went to investigate. Finding nothing, she was returning to bed when she stepped in something wet. There, beneath the kitchen window, was a small pool of water. There had been no rain for days, and there was just this inexplicable puddle. Then she noticed that leading away from it were what appeared to be the footprints of a child, footprints that stopped at the edge of her bed.